We expect all our team to be able to represent themselves through data only. We don't allow presentations, we don't allow lengthy emails, it's just, Excel, it's just data really. There's a massive opportunity ahead of us in the next 3 to 5 years, that's how we believe. Core e-commerce categories are still there to grow. All the digital companies are basically now competing in a wallet share of time of the customer. As Trendyol, we're also competing with social networks, we're also competing with games. One of the KPIs in Trendyol we have is to increase the amount of time that the customers spend on our platforms.
Learn from the best with Unpacking Success, the DHL e-commerce podcast with Pablo Ciano.
Hello and welcome to Unpacking Success, the podcast where we deep dive into the personal journeys and business insights of the e-commerce industry leaders. Today, I have the pleasure of having with me the CEO of Trendyol, Erdem İnan. Erdem, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for your invitation. It's great to be here.
It's an honor to have the opportunity to talk to you and learn, of course, a lot about the industry in Turkey and also your own personal journey. So maybe we can start with a little bit of the history of Trendyol. Trendyol was founded in 2010, so it's not that old of a company, only 15 years that when you look in terms of course, of company history is not that much. You joined the company in 2017, right? Mm-hmm. As the head of global growth, which looks like you did an amazing job because, of course, the company has been growing very steadily. And in 2023, you became the CEO of the Trendyol Group. So, Erdem, in your experience with more than half of the history of Trendyol, can you point into something like the secret formula for Trendyol? Any specific behaviors, mindsets, actions that you can point into saying this is why we have been so successful?
I think there's one picture. So back in 2010, when the company was established, there was like a small paint. Yeah, that's currently our mascot, and it's hanged all over the place in the office right now. It's basically a small dog with like a very small stick in his mouth, just looking straight ahead, where like there are a lot of other dogs, like much larger, stronger, looking directly at this small dog, is like almost competing, willing to fight with him and so on. But the small dog like keeps looking ahead. Yeah, this is our mascot called Rocky, and this I think explains quite well of what Trendyol is doing. We like to be the kind of the underdog, is like, the fast one, the small one, the ability to react and, readjust is one of our core strengths. And we don't usually obsess over our competition. We just try to, really do what is the best for the sellers and the customers. And eventually we believe we will win. That's how we think. And I think Trendyol has been very consistent in this, over the course of last 15 years. That also helped us grow really nicely, both domestically and internationally. And looking at, around us, the way we think is, when we go into a new market or when we operate in our own markets, if we want to be in the long-term sustainable, scalable operations, we learned quite well that we need to integrate with the local ecosystem very well. It means, you need to create an ecosystem, a landscape where, all the different parts of this ecosystem benefits from your growth. This means your logistics partners, your banking partners, your telecom partners, everyone should be happy and willing to help this ecosystem to grow. And that's, I think, very consistent both domestically and internationally as well when we go into a new market.
Beginning with the name of the dog, Rocky, which is very nice, because my dog, you won't believe it, is also named Rocky. Oh, wow. Maybe it's not as powerful as Trendyol, but definitely, of course, some connection here. Yeah. So you mentioned a lot of super interesting things, and let's try to unpack them one at a time. International expansion, agile, ambitious dog with a big bite. So how were you able, as you were growing, because now you are a massive company, right? With a huge ecosystem, as you were describing, with multiple operations, not only in Turkey, but growing internationally. How were you able to keep that mindset of the agile, ambitious, small dog?
Actually, like as the organization grows, you need to have some fundamental, consistent ways of thinking, ways of working. I think one of the things that we are very consistent is, our ability to deal with data. So in Trendyol, like we don't allow presentations, we don't allow lengthy emails. It's just, Excel. It's just data really. And we expect all our team to be able to represent themselves through data only. That really helped us to give many decisions. And, we divide all our decisions into two, one like being reversible decisions and second being irreversible decisions. And we tend to be very cautious, very upfront planned for irreversible decisions. Whereas, for reversible decisions, which is like 95% of day-to-day decisions, I would say, is we tend to try. Let's try it out. Let's see what's working well, what's not working well. And if something goes bad, like we can just take it back. That's kind of the way of thinking. Yeah. This also helps us with just moving fast and readjust ourselves because, once you decide to test something out, you also have an understanding of how to evaluate its success. And that's also, a good indicator of whether you should continue to iterate or whether you should think about something else as a solution.
And in that journey, when you were growing and of course continuously applying this data-driven management and also, as you were describing, the different type of decisions, did anything change when Alibaba acquired majority ownership? That was in 2018, I think it was, right? So were you able to keep that mindset and that approach?
Of course. And I think that's one of the reasons why they invested in the company as well. A couple of years later, we also got investment from other global investors as well. And that's actually what they like in Trendyol. Yeah, like the ability to move fast, to react and readjust very properly and quickly. The basic core fundamentals of the company and the culture is something, all the investors value a lot about Trendyol, and of course we tend to keep it, yeah. And about this pace of change, I want to give a specific example because Trendyol had to reinvent itself a couple of times in its history. Yeah, we had our own private label, so we were producing fashion products. Initially, we were like a private shopping site. Back then, it was the trendy thing. And then we had to add a lot of different categories. We were basically a retail company, but then we had to reinvent ourselves of becoming a full-end marketplace, which was a complete, different way of thinking and operating. And during COVID, we had to, introduce meal and grocery and quick commerce capabilities. We had to build up our own logistics infrastructure in some remote areas as well. We had to work on our own payment infrastructure. So these has always been very big transformations in our history that had to be done in a very small amount of time. So I think it's also in our DNA to really reposition and readjust. And that's also why like the Rocky dog is like the small one is like really quickly moving around. Yeah.
Nice, very nice. And you referred to, of course, that adaptation that now became the ecosystem that you're referring to.
Yes.
And, of course, I was going to point into that because it's super interesting to see that you have now a very broad portfolio of different products. So, of course, you have the traditional marketplace, but you have Trendyol Pay, you have Trendyol Tech, you have Trendyol Go, you have Dolap, which is the second-hand consumer. So really an impressive portfolio. The question is, first of all, which of those different segments do you feel most optimistic about in the future? And also, how do you spend your time? Because it's a typical 80-20 rule. Probably 80% of your opportunities come from 20% of the initiatives, but you also need to deal with the day-to-day and the emergencies. So again, which of these segments are you most optimistic about for the future? And also, how do you spend your time in each of those different segments?
The way we look specifically in the markets we operate in is like, we first look the macro factors, right? Like the e-commerce penetration, for example, in Turkey is still around 18-19%. Whereas when you go into developed markets, you can see, up to 40-45% of e-commerce penetration over retail, which means even in our domestic market, we still have a massive opportunity to grow. And this is across all different segments. This is not only in second-hand meal and grocery. It's just literally like the core e-commerce categories are still there to grow. in the next couple of years. So when we look at international markets that we tend to focus on, like when you go to Gulf, Turkey countries, Eastern Europe, these have even lower penetration of e-commerce. So there's a massive opportunity ahead of us in the next 3 to 5 years. That's how we believe that this e-commerce penetration itself will grow substantially because the logistics and the payments infrastructure of these regions are getting much stronger. Looking at Turkey, I think, we have around 250,000 active sellers in our platform, which is like a massive selection. And 80% of the products we're selling is produced in Turkey. So there's like a big production capability as well. One of the areas that we had been focusing on is to make sure that these sellers have the capability to export elsewhere, which is something as Trendyol we take over as our responsibility to solve. So I think, going forward, the way we look at what to prioritize is things that has the largest impact. Actually, we have a very basic Excel that says like impact efforts. And, if something's impact is large, X large with, a small or medium effort, that goes very up, high in our roadmap. And that's how we prioritize. Every couple of months, we look at all the projects we have. And then, once we find opportunities that has low effort versus a large impact, that's what we prioritize. And that's what I spent most of my time. This also goes, of course, with if something is new to the organization, we as Trendyol leaders expect our leaders, including myself, to, put their hands down and work on it just very closely with the team as a trailblazer, like as someone to lead the path. That's our leadership philosophy as well. Like if something is new to the team, there's a lot of uncertainties. We expect our leaders to take responsibility and clear the path for the team.
Impressive. And of course, I would like to pick up on the number that you just mentioned, which is 250,000 sellers, which is impressive, right? If you think about 250,000 sellers and also cross-border, as you know, at DHL, we are definitely focusing on cross-border expansion. In particular, in Turkey, we see across the board, Turkey becoming a center of production for the world. And of course, this entire China plus one and plus more than one countries is expanding, and Turkey is very well positioned to accomplish that. And of course, you being there, absolutely a huge opportunity. How do you choose which markets also to prioritize? And what are the things, what are the skills that you think that a company requires like yours in order to expand internationally?
Like we have a scorecard, again, a data sheet, to choose which countries to target for. And we specifically look, like when we look at a certain market, we specifically look if we have unique advantages for this market as Trendyol. Yeah. And this might be cultural advantages. This can be like, we literally look for if the TV shows that are watched in this specific market is from Turkey. Because Turkey has a very big, TV industry that exports series and so on. So that's one of the factors. The second factor we look is like how well known are the existing selection we have in that specific market. How are they performing? Yeah, like if the Turkish brands, Turkish sellers are already successful in that region, that's a positive sign for us. How advantageous we are logistically, because, in most of the markets, the competition comes either from the United States or from China. Yeah. And there's also local competition. So we look at the existing landscape in a market to see, if we can have a logistics advantage. Sometimes we can ship by truck, which is a massive advantage, both cost wise and the flexibility wise is a big pros for us. We also look for like the existing competition. Do they have a fashion player or like a female heavy platform that has very high frequency? So if we see that, the competition is also good from this perspective for us, then we test it out. And, we learned it because we had to improve. We had to change our technological infrastructure to be able to test new countries very quickly. This was not possible in Trendyol a couple of years ago because we were launching a new country maybe in 6 months because it requires a massive transformation for the code base. What we did was like we worked on a big project to enable our infrastructure to be launched in different countries in a very short amount of time. Right now, it's just like 1-2 weeks that we can launch a new country. So again, the same thing, like the quick iteration cycles we need. And honestly, like in a couple of months, we can see the data if it's really working as well, or if there are better opportunities elsewhere. And that's how we've been operating in the last 2.5 years, which also helped us to invest more cleverly to which markets we want to go.
Yeah, really impressive because you are growing. You are now present in 27 markets, I think, right?
True.
And growing,
Yes.
which is really remarkable. So let's go back to the 2,050,000 merchants, which is, again, an impressive number. When you are developing your offering, of course, you have on one side consumers, and on the other side, you have the merchants. How do you manage those two different sides of the same coin? And do you have people looking at one of those segments, another type of team members looking at the experience for consumers, and another group of team members looking at merchants? How do you manage that within Trendyol?
What is usually the seller's benefit eventually is to the customer's benefit as well. Because the better the seller gets in terms of efficiency, in terms of, better managing their, P&L and service quality and so on, eventually benefits the customer experience as well. So we have a 2,000 people technology team. And the biggest domain we have is the seller center. And this is quite different than a lot of probably the e-commerce companies around. But we believe, we eventually need to automate and, make self-serve tools to help those sellers because they want to control everything by themselves. They want to have the ability. And this includes, for example, sellers are able to create their own stores in Trendyol. They can decorate their own stores. They can put their banners. They can put videos. They can collaborate with influencers without us involving. And they can answer the questions of the customers in, 15 different languages by just speaking their own language. And they have this, AI-driven automated, dashboards, data reports that helps them to develop their businesses in many markets. So, among these 250,000 sellers, half of them has done an export. And, 80% of these sellers have never sold a product outside Turkey before. So we find this very, a proud moment for us, honestly, because these products, if we didn't, work with them, collaborate with them, would probably not reach anywhere else than their own cities. And, we want to increase these number of stories going forward as well.
Do you think that the sellers who are not selling cross-border, what are the main challenges that they're facing? What are their fears? And is that potential expansion going to be through the Trendyol marketplace in other countries, basically through Trendyol being able to export? Is that how you are envisioning that?
Yeah. So for the sellers who are currently not selling, to other markets, is most of the cases, it's about their product compliance rule sets. For example, the tests they need to pass in order to sell in that new market. And only by then, they start thinking about investing. Okay, do I really, want to pass these tests to these products so that I can start competing internationally? Because that's an investment and a decision, of course, by the seller, right? What we do is like we ease these processes for them. Yeah. For example, the principle, of design for our export process was basically this. We want our sellers to be able to sell to any different cities, like they're selling to Ankara, like they're selling to Istanbul, like they're selling domestically. We started with this basic principle and we designed the whole process with no changes compared to a domestic sale. This gives a lot of motivation to most of our sellers to even expand their portfolio. Like they start thinking, okay, my winter coat does not sell in Turkey, and we have these examples, might be very high performing in Eastern Europe due to many different reasons. And they start thinking, okay, maybe I should produce a separate line for this specific region. And technology just enables this because we show them, okay, this market is different than Turkey or than, your existing markets from this perspective. So we suggest you maybe create larger sizes or maybe create more winter-like selection compared to your own selection in Gulf states. So the way of thinking is always, how do we make sellers' lives easier, for them to operate like they're operating in their own shop.
And there's a lot of complexity also, not only as you were describing in terms of product offering and all of that and consumer adoption, but also the entire customs clearance and other type of processes that are required to export. And as you know, as DHL, we have a pretty broad experience in that area. Are you providing the sellers with a turnkey solution that will handle everything, not only from product offering, but also the entire end-to-end logistics from pickup in Turkey all the way to delivery in the destination country?
That's where our partners come in. But sellers should focus primarily on producing good products and, putting good products in our marketplace. So they shouldn't be focusing on things that, does not help them grow. And, all these processes, we say to our sellers, we'll handle it for you. We'll handle it through our partners, through the ecosystem. You please focus on producing the right product for right price and give a good customer experience. And that's what actually they're doing now. That's what we can solve through technology and through partners like you.
That's impressive. Are there any trends that have surprised you in the last 3 years or 3 years ago that you thought that this would never happen and now is happening? Is there an example of those trends that might have surprised you? And are there new trends that you are beginning to identify as potential opportunities for the next few years?
So one thing we've realized, I think, over the last 5-6 years is the convergence of trending products. Take fashion, I think 5-6 years ago, the styles that were sold in international markets were more distinct, were more different than each other than today's. When we go into different markets, what we see is like 60-65% of what we sell is usually very consistent across different markets, whereas this ratio was much lower in a couple of years ago. We find a top-selling dress in Dubai, in Baku, in Istanbul, and in Bucharest at the same time. So, you wouldn't expect this to be this consistent, right? This is one thing. And the second thing is, since I come from a gaming background as well, like I used to work in a gaming company, I find it fascinating that the entertainment industry and e-commerce industry is converging very quickly. So I think we'll see a lot of entertainment items in shopping experiences. We can see it in social networks. We can see, e-commerce companies having gamified features and products. We can also see, a lot of content being produced and consumed in e-commerce companies as well. This was not the case before. All the digital companies are basically now competing in a wallet share of time of the customer, which means, as Trendyol, we're also competing with social networks. We're also competing with games because, one of the KPIs in Trendyol we have is to increase the amount of time that the customers spend on our platforms. And this can happen with, better content, better videos, influencer interactions, so much to play on the platform itself. And we're seeing it across the globe, really. Like when you go into social networks, you start seeing shopping elements in it. When you go into gaming products, you start seeing a lot of shoppable content or merchandising stuff happening. And when you go into e-commerce companies, probably a lot of the e-commerce companies produce a lot of content, almost like a social network. That's one of the trends I think will increase over time as well.
That's super interesting. And do you see those social media platforms? We see a lot, of course, of e-commerce going on today through Instagram or TikTok or similar platforms. Do you see that as a potential competition for Trendyol or the more established type of marketplaces? Or do you think that is all part of a bigger ecosystem where everyone will benefit?
I think they're our partner in terms of traffic, but in the long run, they will also be a competitor in terms of, time spent and probably at some point as a shopping competitor. So it's a massive ecosystem. So I think no one can isolate each other. It also lets us really understand what the customers expect from any platform. I think we've learned in the last couple of years, you can't isolate the consumption of content from a shopping experience. So that's what we've learned. And that's also changed the way of thinking, honestly. I think both for social networks and for e-commerce companies. Even the KPIs, honestly. Like when I started the e-commerce KPIs were more transactional, were more targeted towards, conversion, shopping metrics and the funnels and so on. We still have those metrics. They're still very important. But over time, we added a lot of, time spent, daily active users, session per user, like how sticky the platforms are. These type of metrics usually are inherited from entertainment, like that's usually what you optimize for in a game or in a movie or in an entertainment-based apps. And I think this will happen more and more going forward.
That's super interesting. So we have talked a lot about the company, the history, the trends, the consumers. Let's switch, if you're okay now, to your own personal journey. A little bit of your own personal journey. If I'm not wrong, you, as you were saying, you work for a gaming company in the US. Is that correct? Yes.
True.
And I was wondering, what was your own personal experience, differences between working for an American company and
it was a Turkish company,
Turkish,
by the way.
It was a Turkish company. Okay. But in the US,
yes,
right?
I worked in Turkey and then in the US as well. Yeah.
Okay. And did you observe any type of differences between US consumers, US ecosystem versus the Turkish one? Any observations?
Yeah. So I think like the customer perspective in entertainment and in gaming is usually very, very consistent, even more than e-commerce, honestly. So a popular game in the US can easily be successful in any other markets. The popular culture there is more dominant, so to say. So when you hear about, big successful games, it tends to be very consistent across different regions. So I think from a customer perspective, I wouldn't say there are so many differences. Yeah. But from a team perspective, I think, Trendyol at the moment has a lot of commonalities with another technology company. Regardless of the industry, I think the tech companies, the startup type of companies have so much commonalities in the working culture, in the way you operate, you give feedback, you communicate with your colleagues. So I would say the transition from that industry to this one, has different technical expertise and know-how. But overall, the way of working I would say like 90% stayed same. And
throughout your career, if you look backwards, is there any moment or decision that you feel the most proud about?
I think like the moment we said, okay, we should, focus on, making, international happen, like really like our international expansion moment 3 years ago was a very difficult decision. It was not obvious because it involves a lot of risks, it involves a lot of uncertainties. And we honestly had a good comfort zone in Turkey back then. Our Turkish domestic business was going really well. So we could have stayed in where we were, And I think that was a good decision by our senior management, by all of us. So we were very consistent and I think resilient in terms of, staying with our decision. And I think that was the right decision. I think it also helped us to really develop ourselves, maybe to compete in an upper league, I would say, or at least have a chance to compete in the upper league.
And you have your business 24/7 in your hand because to some extent you have your phone, laptop or iPad and you could be looking at every single minute to your business. How do you manage to not think about your business, to disconnect from your operations? What type of tricks or recommendations can you share?
I try to do it through, of course, creating some specific time for family and for hobbies and so on. I'm not very good at it, to be fully honest. But I also do enjoy really like thinking about the business because like I feel really positive, working for a company that I believe in the purpose of. And I usually tell the team as well, like I think, you always need to feel happy for the company you're working for. You always have to feel passionate. It's the exact sign that you shouldn't have a Monday syndrome if you're working in the right job, right? Of course, I have my own, rituals. So to say, I like cooking. I like reading books with children, with my kids, and this helps me to stay a bit, out of the context. And I also try to really focus on things that helps me think in a different profession, in a different vertical. It usually helps me to refresh, like, for example, I do read about other industries. I do really talk with people, with experts, so to say, maybe a chef, maybe a sociologist, or maybe a historian. Like, I do enjoy having those conversations because it helps you trigger really new thoughts about your own business as well. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Nice, very nice. And any book that you are reading right now, that you have read in the recent past, that you would like to recommend to the audience?
Radical Candor is a book that every person in Trendyol we advise to read, and I actually think it's a
Radical. You said
Radical Candor.
Radical?
Yeah.
Candor. Okay,
yes,
that's nice.
It helps with the feedback. Yeah, like how do you give feedback? How do you communicate with people? How to communicate, efficiently and effectively while staying really empathetical, like really caring your team, but at the same time giving them good feedback. I think it's a very good book.
And if you were not working in e-commerce and Trendyol, is there any industry company that you would like to be working for? Besides DHL potentially, right?
So I think I enjoy e-commerce really. Like it just is everything in a mix, so to say. Like you have your entertainment part, you have your shopping part, you have your logistics, offline presence. So e-commerce is, as you know, like it's a very complex industry that involves many challenges at the same time. So I do enjoy, honestly, being in the industry.
Nice, very good. So Erdem, we have, I think, covered a lot of territory. I thank you for your patience and thank you for all the beautiful insights, business-wise and personal journey as well.
It was a pleasure, really, being here.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and looking forward to seeing you soon, and looking forward to more of these conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pablo.